I'm on the this new workout program. It's Body by Bojangles.
Hmm. Yeah.
I, th-
What does that
I started
entail?
it about 2 years ago and hit my target weight. Now I just got to maintain. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get ready to exit the desk and actually work in the field. So,
Yeah. Corey. So my wife is Corey,
mhm.
and she's always like, "Oh yeah, you got a dad bod," and I was like, "It's a father figure," you know.
Exactly. Proper terminology.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, I'm trying to figure out my exit strategy as well. It's like, with spring, it's like I could wait till I think I'm gonna wait till spring,
Yeah.
but it just depends on like how much I want to put up with at this point.
Yeah. I completely understand. That's kind of where I'm at. But I was just looking to minimize an income gap,
That's
because
that. Yeah.
typically, well, like I've done the past couple of years, I would open my website January 1 and pre-sell, like, what I knew I would produce, go ahead and open it up, and then I would just work the list top to bottom. And it took me so long this year because it was a rough year. It took me like 4 weeks, 5 weeks longer than normal to produce the same amount. And it was the worst honey year we've had that I've ever seen
Really.
where I'm at.
Okay.
Yeah, which it's odd. You go around the state, some people say the same thing. Some people had a good year. But anyway, so it got me rethinking, do I really want to pre-sell? Because once you pre-sell, you don't know exactly what you have to ship each week until it is in your hand. That's just
Right.
green rearing, seems like. And then I would know what I've got. I'm trying to schedule out a week or 2 weeks in advance, so I'm guessing. And it was just difficult. And then I would say, "Hey, can you take your queens? Oh, we're gone that week," or so making
Yeah.
a variable schedule meet beekeepers' variable schedule, like it was. I do logistics for my day job for Nestle.
Sure. Sure.
It was just too chaotic. I'm like, there's got to be a better way than this. And I think my demand is high enough that next year I'm just going to post what I have to ship, real time inventory, and it'll be updated daily or weekly at the latest, and just buy it or don't buy it. And I think the demand's high enough that it'll I'll sell them.
Are you grafting like every 4 days? What's
Mm-hmm.
your? I mean, once a week.
Once a week, yep. Because I have a day job. I may change that up and graft multiple times a week whenever I'm not working for Nestle this next year. But I had to have it set, and I would take off every Monday, so I would graft every Monday, and so every weekend subsequently I have queens coming out, and then Monday I would ship. Monday through Wednesday I would ship whenever people would
Yeah. Yeah.
would want them. So, but and I've got it down running like a sewing machine. It's just production is variable. Like you'll have, and I use a bunch of builders, but you'll have a builder throw a fit or a virgins find their way in there and wipe them out. You know what I mean? Like there's
Oh,
anything
I had that.
go wrong. I've pretty much seen it, but at this point, but
I had 2 weeks in a row. I was grafting every 5 days for a little while there, just to hit my numbers. We didn't sell any queens this year. We were still growing,
mm-hmm.
and all not a sell made. We looked through it. Everything looked right. All right, we got to send another graft. Come back, a week later, check, or 5 days later, come back, check on it, and still no sales. I said, all right, we got to queen in here.
Yep.
So, and it's like, man, it's just
Yep,
it
exactly.
you can't help you have to have multiple builders. I mean,
Agreed. And even with multiple builders, you still have variables. Like this year, typically our nectar flow will follow a bell curve. So like I can
yeah,
feel it coming on, and whenever it's really heavy, like I can max out. Like your colonies are wanting to swarm, they're wanting to raise queens. They'll raise high quality queens. They'll raise a bunch of queens. If that nutrition shuts off, even if you're feeding them, I don't care. Like you can you can fake Mother Nature a little bit, but you're nothing compared to what she can come up with. So basically, whenever that nectar flow is doing this constantly, your production will mirror that. And it was, instead of a nice, solid, easy bell curve with a peak where you can bank on, it was like a little bumpy roller coaster ride. I mean, we still shipped over 2,000 queens, so it's not like, you know, you weren't able to produce anything. I just had to fight way harder for it than what I normally do. And
Yeah.
the honey yield affirmed what I had seen with queen rearing, that it was not a
Do
great.
you do honey as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's just kind of because if you've got healthy hives that are big and you got a decent year, you're going to have some honey to deal with. And I don't want to bulk it out. You might as well just leave it on the colonies, I feel like. And other
Sure.
people don't look at it that way. This is a day job talking. I may look at it differently whenever I have tons of honey and I need to get rid of it.
Sure.
Then your perspective's different, but for me, no, I would harvest it because I had people that wanted it. Good quality, it's not contaminated. I take really good care of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and it's kind of complements, whenever your queens are done, you still have some residual income coming in. So,
Sure. Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what's nice about ours. I sold some bulk just to get some cash flow in the fall to cover fall feeding and mite treatments. Just
Cash.
cash, and
Yep.
then it's decisions you don't want to make, but the business calls for it. You have when you're in our there's always, I describe like there's good beekeepers, there's good business people. It's hard to find both.
That's the truth.
Not everybody's good at it. It goes in plumbing, electricians, maintenance, whatever, same thing.
Yep.
I don't fancy myself good at either, but I think I'm decent in both departments, and I really try and leave our business expenses as business expenses. And I could come out of pocket on it, but then it's kind of going backward. Sometimes you have to make a quick decision, but I really try and keep it the business oriented, and so I didn't want to make those bulk sales because we're in about 40 retail locations now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and which is great. So we're still wholesaling. It's a wholesale price, but still, it's much better than bulk.
Bulk, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so my big thing last year was not being able to keep we had 12 stores supplied. So our goal this year is to keep 12 months. Once you get that shelf space, you don't want to lose it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got great relationships, man. Like I'm so blessed. Just
awesome.
It seems like I hit the jackpot. I did a lot of cold calling. I have a sales background, so the people who, if you want to say they bit, the people I'm working with, man, they were just on it. Yeah, we'd love to have your product. Bring us some samples, and so I feel very blessed to have that shelf space. Now we just have to keep that maintained.
Sure. Yep. And I focused on queens, and I've always been terrible at marketing my honey. Like I've always gotten rid of it, but and it wasn't really my focus, but I feel like now, like I'm going to expand and I'm going to need the other side of that income too, since I'm not leaning on a day job. And so
Sure.
I'll plan to step that up, and it'll be wholesale too. I'd rather sell cases and whatnot than drums if I can.
So, Philip Haynes, you talked to him?
The name's
Ape and Bees out of Laurinburg.
Okay.
He was in my UBeeO video with Phoebe, and he's a good friend of mine, and we probably talk once a week on the way home for at least an hour, and bounce a lot of ideas. He runs about 300 colonies, and he has just been fantastic at helping me work through these. There's very few people you can talk to and work through these little details of your your business. And hey, do you think I should do this? What's your experience with this? Have you heard?
Yeah.
He has encouraged. He's been very encouraging of me to just go for it. For the full time beekeeping. And it's amazing to have somebody's perspective who's also doing it. So I guess this is a good way of me saying thanks for taking this call tonight. Like, it's nice to have that person to bounce those ideas off of. Man, it's
Sure.
just.
Yeah.
Um, but he's big on doing virgins and the easy beezy cages, and um, he did UBeeO with us,
Mm.
and had good success. Like his um, he had his high scores were like yours, high scorers.
Yep.
So
And
yeah, we're gonna
I wanted to tell people too, like some people don't know what UBeeO is, but it's Kara Wagner and Phoebe were working on. It's basically what I would describe as you're spraying like stress pheromones kind of on the brood, and you're measuring the bees' response to it. So if they're hygienic, generally speaking, with this test, it's more Varroa focused, but you're measuring their response to that. So like a low response, and some of ours had a low response, is like they don't even acknowledge it, like they don't even touch it.
yeah.
And then we had other ones that are like a perfect score, and that if you looked at it, you would just see all the pupas' faces. They pulled all the caps off and they're checking it out. And then we had a portion of ours that there was no sample left. There was no pupa left.
Completely removed.
There wasn't one left. Yeah. And then there were varying stages of that to where they were chewed in half and there was a few left. And then you had your perfect, which Kara said what she said a perfect score would be would not that they chewed the pupa, but just that they opened it up. So like we
Yeah.
had this spectrum. And I think most people might get discouraged, but I think Kara said 2 to 4% of the population will score a good
Yeah.
score. And so, like, if you just walk into a random population of bees, you're not going to get a huge number of these things that are just slaying it. It's just because you've never selected for it. Why would you have that? You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, that's great for people at home who don't know. So, um, so I'm friends with Phoebe Snyder, who's Kara's business partner. Funny enough, is I've never met Kara in person.
Oh,
Um, I've
Kara.
I've only known yeah, I've only known Phoebe. And she, my wife, and myself, we get together regularly. She's just 15 minutes away,
Oh, cool.
and uh, Phoebe, I attribute a lot of my success to being. You know how you say like some people don't come with bad habits. I didn't come with bad habits, but I quickly realized that like I need to get up to speed fast. So how do I do that? And I
Yeah.
really dove down the rabbit hole, and I enjoy research papers, and I don't have the years of experience, but I have the colony numbers and the knowledge and the understanding of how we, based on facts that we know, genetic diversity is the biggest thing. And it's amazing to me. I'm doing a lot of like local club level speeches right now, and it's amazing to me that people don't want to work together as a club to
Yeah.
achieve the same goal. I'm basically like, I don't have a problem. I'm giving people here's the prescription on how I did it. You need to knock on a lot of doors. You need to have very few hives in the area. You need to have all your best hives brought to that area. So, for us, last winter, I probably knocked on 100 doors, cold call knocked, and we got 6 yards around a central point, about a mile out.
Nice.
Yeah, and so we brought all of our best hot. We did our first grafts on March 8th, and the night of March 16th, we brought in all of our hives to those yards. Um, and we brought in 120 colonies, and there was an additional 27 colonies in the area from 3 other beekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy has 20, and I got to know him fairly well and let him know what I was doing. And so we just kind of brought in our best, and the goal then was, and I had done Harbo assays last July, so we kind of knew coming out of winter who scored decent, not great,
Yeah.
but and then the big test to me is get through winter and literally watch who comes out swinging.
Yeah,
because that's your only time of year where, in a scientific study, you have to see, you have to make all things equal.
yep,
So to say, oh, we're gonna select a colony based on honey production, well, honey production is so variable. It's local flora and fauna, how well the beekeeper did with a day job.
yep,
I'm,
exactly.
I'm sure you do that too.
Which is poor at times.
Yeah. So, we pulled our best colonies in, and then we tested that with UBeeO, and we had the weirdest thing happen. I was ready to go for tests at like I want to say it was like April 27th, and we ended up waiting 2 weeks until I want to say about May the 7th, May the 9th, something like that.
Yeah.
Weather caused a bump. Well, our nectar flow kicked off here about April the 15th. So it'd been a month I mean, we're in the peak of our nectar flow. And I had like 70 colonies ready to test.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a third of my operation, I mean, 100 colonies swarmed between May 2nd and May 9th.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the only person to go through this in my area. So I feel like we all manage our colonies similar. A lot of these guys might have 50 or 100 hives. I value their opinions. And if they're all seeing it, something's going on that the bees know that we don't know. But it only left me with 23 colonies that had kind of met that. They came out of winter swinging and then they didn't swarm.
Yep.
I had one colony make four deep boxes of honey plus 3 more frames.
Awesome. Yeah. Can't argue with that.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And with a high scoring UBeeO queen.
Awesome.
And so we ended up having 7 high scorers. All those colonies made at least 200 pounds each. What do you guys say? Yeah, lucked out. So we basically hurried up right around the 1st of June. We did a hurry up and grafted from all those queens to get around a nukes in. So got about 160 nukes that are F1s.
Awesome.
We did the next go round. I was making some queen cells for a buddy of mine, and you talk about our flow turned off about June the 10th, our nectar flow for those of you at home. And I grafted on, I want to say it was the 13th of June, because he came to get the cells on the 21st, and I grafted 90 cells, did everything right, and I think we only got 32, or I did 90 grafts, and it was, I want to make sure I'm telling you this right. It was 6 bars of 15. Is that right?
Yeah.
Doing the math real quick, 90.
Yep.
And we only got 32 cells out of it.
Yep. But that's what I was saying earlier. If that pollen and nectar just face plants, your queen production is going to mirror that. And I'm talking about feeding on top of it, giving them a couple gallons or whatever. It doesn't matter. It seems like whenever you hit the wall like that on nectar and pollen, it just shuts off. We had a nice late June and July flow, thank God, and put weight back on the colonies. And then we were able to Harbo test. Well, I don't want to say the date. I'm thinking it was like the first week of September, maybe. I had some guys out of Michigan, Matt Kobe and
Matt Kobe. I saw your post on that.
Yep, and James Lee, they all came down, or I wouldn't have got it done if I didn't have the help from those dudes. Like I wouldn't have got the data to get a good comparison. So thanks to those guys for sure. But it was kind of cool to see. I'll probably
since you brought up James Lee, that's a question I got. He and I have been talking a bit, so I'd like to pick your brain on this one. Kara's work shows that the UBeeO test should be a springtime test, and a Harbo should be like for us, we're treating August 1, so I want to be doing Harbos the last week of July. Right now, and when I say this will be after talking with James and picking his brain a bit. I listened to Randy Oliver's with the Southern Beekeepers Guild of Michigan, the SGBMI. Randy Oliver gave a really good talk there about you just don't treat your breeder queens. Well, that makes sense. So James has really convinced me that UBeeO is testing this. It's adding a stress pheromone to the cappings of that brood. Obviously, with UBeeO, I don't know if you had this experience. If you spray it on too fast, it'll eat away at the cappings. You have to
hexane oil.
Yeah. Yep. And so your UBeeO and Harbo are two different tools.
Totally, yeah.
And you almost need to use both to achieve the goal that I know I'm after, and I think you're after, which is we're looking for mite resistance, not tolerance.
Actual measurable mite resistance, yeah. Not snake oil, not I just pulled my hand off the wheel and trusted it would not go in the dish. Actually measure.
Because
yeah,
at this point, like, you've done a really good job. I've watched so much of your content last couple of years. You've done a great job at really grinding it out, doing all of these Harbo tests. I mean, I know the hours that went into that.
But I had a lot of volunteers, though, just like James and them coming out. If it was all on me, I don't think I would have got as much done. But I had local beekeeping buddies, same way. You said you're blessed with a lot of good relationships, same with me. And I've got people that were interested in what I was doing and wanted to come help, so yeah.
Okay. Well, I agree with, I'm trying to look at a field. All right, come spring, my criteria, and I really like your opinion if you think this is spot on or not. My criteria is who overwintered and came out of winter swinging. Step one.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree.
Step two, who doesn't swarm. We're treating them all the same. We're balancing brood on the same date. And for those of you at home, meaning that, like, we're trying to give everybody 6 frames of brood on a certain date. But some queens are just going to build up way faster than others. Yeah. That's our next selection criteria. Is if they don't build up, we can quickly narrow 500 colonies down to 100.
Totally, yeah.
And then our obvious, we're really going to be looking at these 160 F1s. I'm going to go to say we're going to have some winter losses, so let's just call it 100 for a round number. We're watching those 100. I'd really like to see 50 of them come out swinging, and now we've got 50 to test with UBeeO in the springtime.
Yep.
Then we get into late July. We give, let's say, out of the UBeeO, we get 30. I think that's real. 30 out of 100 would be 33%. We would expect at least that, based on the queen mother, is passing 80% of those genetics. So, for me, July, we're going to run a Harbo assay, and I need them to score high in both UBeeO in the spring, Harbo in late summer. Then no treatments for those queens, and let them overwinter.
Yep.
You got any criticism there?
No, I think it's a good approach. And I just wasn't large enough. That's why I just stopped treating, years ago, because I'm like, I can't see what they're doing. And I was, from year 3, I was like, I want to breed bees that are resistant to Varroa. I've read the books. I've read some papers. I know there's traits out there. So we just need to pick some of the best ones and go with that and then see where it leads. And we'll learn more. We don't know it all. That's why I stopped treating, was then just to let Mother Nature take her gloves off and punch them around a little bit. So I knew what was coming out the other end probably had something. But the missing piece was I couldn't measure it. And I didn't have confidence.
There's no data.
Yeah, exactly. So I would just order another breeder. I'm like, maybe I'm losing it. I don't know, because you're flying blind because you can't measure anything. Until I joined Harbo's group, and then I learned a whole lot then. And
It's everything is data driven, and once you've got the data, I had colonies that I thought were going to crush it
that,
and scored zeros.
yep, exactly. Yep.
You know, and by that, it's for those of you at home, like it's colonies I thought were going to do fantastic, just didn't even register.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ignored it altogether. So Marla Spivak did a talk recently with the SGBMI. And for those of you that don't know at home, too, it's the Southern Beekeepers Guild of Michigan. James Lee is heading that up, and I've been very impressed. They're basically trying to do a treatment-free beekeeping on a smaller scale, and they're reaching out to commercial folks like myself and Cory to get on board with let's find a mite-resistant bee. And my every talk I've had, I've said we're going since 1987. We've had mites.
Yeah.
If somebody like you and me don't do something now, in 30 years from now, we will have the same problem.
Yep. Yep. Agreed. And the academic community's given us some good tools, but I don't think like you should expect them to just carry the whole load and produce something. I think like they're going to give you the knowledge to do it, and it's up to actual breeders, queen producers, etc., to actually go do the legwork, because that's what beekeepers do the legwork, and then adopt this. But I think the earlier versions, it's just like a Model T Ford. You would compare that to a 23 F-150. It's not going to look the same. So like they say,
Exactly.
look, we found this, and then people would try it and go, it sucks. They'd blow it off, whatever excuse. Well, that's version 1.0. Of course, it sucks.
Yeah.
He also showed you can stick it in anything. So you're going to have super high producers, like you said, that make 4 supers of honey that test high. Well, we just need to keep selecting those out until it's a bit more uniform. And it's still going to be like a shot grouping, like whenever you're all over the paper and you're tightening the frequency, your shots are getting tighter on the paper. It doesn't mean you're not still throwing it occasionally. It's just the way it goes, but it's just getting a higher frequency of that trait in the population. Once you do that, you got wind at your tail.
Well, back to the thing with Marla. So Marla, this is Marla Spivak. She's the head of the University of Minnesota beekeeping, and if I may be a little bit off on my dates, but I think in 1993 she and Dr. Harbo started studying, and they kind of identified SMR, which was early VSH, as a trait, and that has been a big part of her lifelong work. Great. And so in showing, I'm a real graphs and numbers guy. Some people are, just my thing. And she really showed how the University of Minnesota's bees, the data-driven side of it, are very resistant to mites. And after the talk, and I really enjoyed her presentation. Not all presentations do you enjoy. I think you probably watched a few of those.
I agree. Yeah.
And so I asked the question. I said, the first question out of the gate was, "What do you think about UBeeO?" And she said, "Well, I think that it's going to be a great tool in the toolbox." And I'm sitting there going, like, you know more than you're letting on. But she can't say that to the public, so I'll say it for her. I'm a big, not only friends with Phoebe, but I'm a big proponent of UBeeO. I think this is going to be a game-changing tool for even small-scale beekeeping. Like, if you've got 40 colonies, you can become a bee breeder, and a very effective one at that. So Bob Benny did a video about a year ago with Keith Delaplane from University of Georgia, and the study that Keith did, and I read up on it later on, but long and short for those of you at home is where they found queens that had bred with at least 30 different drones, that there was significantly less mite numbers in the hive. And we've known this for some time, which is increased genetic diversity. Excuse me.
It's good.
Increased genetic diversity is going to breed a more hygienic bee specific to Varroa. They're going to manage mites better. That was those are facts that don't change. So when Marla brought up her bees, I asked. I said, "Why are we steering away from genetic diversity? Why not use basically UBeeO as a tool? We're looking for this trait, which is Varroa sensitive hygienics, but continue to keep the genetic diversity. So 30 breeder queens is what Randy Oliver prescribes. He said I won't claim to have VSHBs, but a third of our outfit doesn't have any mites.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty good for 1,000 colonies.
Yep.
And for those of you who don't know how Fast Track Marla's work, but right now they have just about every race of bees that you can pull together. They got Russians, Polines, Italians, Carnies, Hilos from Hawaii, lots of genetic diversity of different races of bees. Well, of course they have low mite numbers. There's such genetic diversity in different races. But I'm mainly Italian. We have a touch of Carniolan. The question is how do we spread our genetics? Because that's what this ultimately comes out. Like, if you ask me what's my business model is spreading great genetics, starting in Piedmont, North Carolina, and as we get bigger, going out. I've met a number of people now who have some virgins from you that mated. You're obviously at a bigger scale, but you've been doing it 15 years. Like, high five. I'm proud of you. The goal is we need to get 100 people like you and me spreading lots of genetic diversity.
Agreed. But it can be a double-edged sword, though, because some people have taken Keith's argument of saying genetic diversity. They'll say you can't select because of polyandry, basically, which isn't the case. Like, you need the genetic diversity, but it's not just the diversity that causes the mite resistance. I don't feel like that's just right. Alleles to where you've got killer brood patterns and whatnot. I think you need both. You need the genetic diversity, but you have to add that selection pressure. Because if you have a ton of genetic diversity with colonies that have no measurable mite resistance, your progeny is going to suffer. They're going to be all over the place. You're going to have some that have it and some that do not, even though they have the genetic diversity. So I feel like you have to have both. It's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I want to. Now you said that, you confirmed my, what I'm going to ask next, which is, so myself and Phil, Phoebe, and we're talking to one other person right now. It's based on you could say honor or integrity, but we're starting a co-op. In that we all have some high UBeeO queens, and so what we're going to do is we're going to trade virgins with one another at no cost, no money exchanged, with a goal being that I can send Phil 30 virgins, I can send Phoebe 30 virgins, she can send me, so that we all end up with, I would love to have 50 high scoring, my goal a year from now would be to have 50 queens that I could call breeder queens that have a great Harbo score and a great UBeeO score. That there's your genetic diversity. Those 50 are in my breeding area. And for those of you at home that don't know, the drone stock is genetically identical to the mother queen.
Pretty close.
So,
it's not exact. It's recombinated. So it's hers, but anyway, I'm getting overly.
No. I mean, somebody's going to love this. Right. Yeah. Somebody's gonna love this, but you're right. I mean, yeah, but the goal is we want our drone flooded area. What they found, what Kara Wagner at UNCG found is if they found a high UBeeO queen and a low UBeeO queen, and they did a test where they bred with a high UBeeO drone and a low UBeeO drone. So you've got 4 phenotypes, 4 outcomes. Then what they found was about 80% of the VSH trait is carried by the mother, not the father. And so instead of, my original thought was, why don't I send some of my virgin stock to Phil's and let them breed with his drone stock? Well, that doesn't make sense because we know that the VSH trait is really carried via the queen, not the drone. So instead, we're going to trade virgins, breed his virgins with my drone stock. And obviously, I'm trying. It'll take 5 years, I really think, or more. You've been doing it for 15.
Yep, and I cheat. I use instrumental insemination. So if you're open mating, like you're going to keep more diversity if you're not a careful practitioner of II. You're not using it like a closed population model, but it takes a little bit longer to get your shot group tight or your frequency tighter, so to speak. But you're doing the right thing. You were talking about a central yard. You're actually testing. That's the first battle. Because some people put all this thought into how to set up their mating yards and they're not really selecting for anything. So, you're not gaining ground. And I like, too, that co-op that you were talking about. Because if everybody is testing and you're wanting lots of diversity, because we know from Keith's study and previous studies that it's good, but like I said earlier, you want the diversity, but you also want it to be sifted through. You want it to be selected. You don't want just complete randomness.
And that's where it's almost, you could call it biosecurity. It's we are trusting one another that I'm giving you virgins from my queen stock and you the same. We're all on board with this program. And not only that too, but it's not like, to me, it makes sense to stick with so in North Carolina, we've got a coastal region, the Piedmont rolls into the foothills and the mountain region. So everybody in our co-op is Piedmont, which is central North Carolina. You could say it's local. Phil's about 100 miles from me. Phoebe's 25 miles from me, and the guy we're talking to is about 35 miles away from me. So we're far enough away for the genetic diversity, but we're still close enough that it's local, And I told him, I was like, I would love to put us all on the map for breeding great stock. Somebody asked me, they said, aren't you afraid that somebody's going to copy what you're doing and put you out of business? And I thought, if we had 10 of us producing 10,000 queens a year, that's only 100,000 queens. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what comes out of South Texas, Louisiana, South Florida, Georgia early on. It doesn't even register.
Yep.
There is such a void. It's funny that like you and I are sitting here having a conversation about testing, and I can count on 2 hands who else is doing this that I know.
That's what I was going to say. Even if they knock off your bees or graft out of one of your queens, you're immediately outcrossing. You're immediately getting a lot of genetic diversity that's not selected, back to what I was talking about earlier. And so it's going to muddy if you're not actually doing the work. So yeah.
You have to find somebody doing the work.
Yep. And you'll have a few people that'll test your stuff, that are nerds that don't have anything to do on Saturday, and they're going to talk to other people too.
Go for it. If there's something, I tell people this: there's nothing I'm doing set in stone. If there is some sort of data-driven, even small scale, if somebody else can show me a better way or a better idea, I will test somebody's idea to try. I'll risk it. I'm a pretty risky person, so we'll pick a yard and go test it. My money's where my mouth is, and I'm not saying that we're breeding great bees. I'm just when I pitched this to I'll call him an acquaintance, but he runs 500 colonies, and I pitched him for our co-op, and I said, all right, we can say at a commercial scale, a hive annually will cost you about $75 roughly in operations expense. And if you take 2 nukes out of it and 45 pounds of honey, that's about $800 for the gross sales. And that's at $10 a pound. So we know that if we have a colony we have to take care of and it doesn't make us any money, it still costs us $75. And last year for us, our winter loss was 15%. We had 300 colonies. We lost 15%. We lost 51.
Yep.
And so if I can get that my immediate goal is to get under 5% loss. Well, that's 30 colonies in the spring that we didn't lose over winter. And if that spring yield is going to be $800 per colony, those 30 colonies make me $24,000.
Yep.
That's huge to the small guy running 300 colonies.
Exactly.
And he completely understood what we're doing. I just don't feel like I captured his attention. I'm not saying he's not on board.
Not everybody's going to go for it too, and I think you gotta, if you're going to do a cooperative thing. I mean, beekeepers can't even agree on screen versus solid bottom board. So what traits are we going to agree on? I mean, I think if you're going to make that work, it has to be people you trust, and everybody's going to screw up and do stupid stuff occasionally, but ultimately people you trust, and with a simple overarching goal. So like if you're just saying we want something resistant, let's focus on UBeeO, maybe add Harbo to it as well, but not add, we want this, we want this, we want this. You know, you just start to get lost in it. I think that's the key to making those successful, are people you trust and people that are just a simple overarching goal that we're moving towards that would unify you.
So here's something that I'm doing with folks that I know and trust. Right now I've got 3. These beekeepers have somewhere between 20 and 50 colonies. And Bob Benny says it well. Beekeeping is 50% art, 50% science, right?
Yep.
And so I'm calling it, I'm leaving it to the eye of the beholder, the beholder, with one lady, she's going into winter with 21 hives. And so we started, I said, I want you to pick your top 3 that come out of winter swinging. This is all based on your criteria, what you see. I think she's been beekeeping 8 years, and I'm going to pay for the UBeeO test on all 3. Now, if one of them tests high, I would like to graft off that queen.
Yep.
In the payment, I'm going to give you 2 separate genetic line queens as payment. And she fell in love with it.
Oh, yeah.
Think about, if I do this with 10 people, that expense to me is 30 tests. That's, if you paid 20 a test, that's $600, which is what one breeder queen costs.
Yep.
But realistically, let's say you've got 10 people that you're doing this with. They each have 20 hives. That's 200 local hives, and I'm leaving it up to the beholder for 10 different beekeepers. So this is going to directly affect my operation, but not Phil's or Phoebe's. I'm tapping into my local stock of who might be 10, 20 miles away. It's my expense, my risk, but we're also going to, these people all understand what we're doing. They're on board with it. They aren't big enough to make an impact, but man, if they could add one more queen with some genetic diversity that's high scoring, then they're a part of the operation. And the payment there is 2 great queens. This is how beekeepers, in my opinion, need to tap into a larger number of colonies without directly carrying the risk.
Right.
Yep. And
industry-driven solutions.
Industry.
Waiting on somebody else to figure it out, too.
Exactly. And not only that, but like you said, everybody keeps bees differently. Mm-hmm. Perfect. But one guy who's in on this, he's a real hands-off guy. he lets them swarm, lets them do their thing. He's treatment free. If they die, they die. He's I know he's got some good stock because he sent me some pictures of uncapping behavior. Is this what you're looking for? I'm sitting here like, yes, please identify that hive. I want to test that. You and I know what it's a brood pattern. It's a look.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to look at a picture for about 3 seconds. Go. That's what we want to look. Yeah. You know what I'm saying. So I told her, I said, that's what I want. Yes, I will be glad to pay to test that. And he's just encouraged to get on board and want some better genetic. He's not going to be a bee breeder, but so again, it's just tapping into your local groups. And,
yep.
All right, so
I want to back at your original question, which ties this, I feel like, all together and is kind of forward thinking. Is you asked me earlier what exactly was the question, basically. Looking at virgin queens as an option. Fire away on that. Let's pick away at that because it's new, industry driven, or not industry accepted per se, but I think it'll be in the future.
So you and I had a prior discussion on the phone. I'm gonna briefly share. You've said this in a number of your YouTube videos, which is it is hard to sell a queen for $25. It's like stealing the heart out of the water. Totally. I think that's your terminology.
Yeah.
When we look at queen breeding at a scale, the time to graft, the time to set up the cell builders, the time for the success rate, the time to go cage, ship, take the losses, $25 just simply doesn't cover it. I'm better off to
keep it.
Yeah, I'm better off to keep it as a nuke and sell it as a nuke next year.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. That I would calculate it like on a per unit cost, like a unit as being a nucleus colony. So I was selling them for $30 because I'm like, if I bump the price up, I'll make some money. So I bump it up to 30. Exactly. But the thing is I would let them sit a minimum of 3 weeks. That's another thing Bob Benny would talk about, with Chris Werner's queens, 3 weeks minimum, and they were just better. They've got that full pheromone profile. They're accepted better. They perform better. So you've got 3 weeks in that queen. Well, my season is basically April, May, June. So I got ideally, and tell me anything that goes ideally all the time with beekeeping. Definitely not.
You're right.
You know what I mean? But in theory, if I got 3 queens out of that nuke, I worked for 3 months and I got $90. The nucleus colonies around here at the time were going for 175 to 185. So I could work 3 times as long and make half as much, or I could just sell the nuke and cash out. So that's what I started doing. And it wasn't profitable. I mean, the numbers don't add up. And so that's where I started selling cells, but then I started selling virgin queens too. And at first people are like, what? Like, no way. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I'm like, okay, then don't get a queen. Yeah. And after a while, I figured out my own method to get a better acceptance rate. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to hit 100 every time. It just means on average, you'll get a better take. You'll still have bad batches occasionally that something happened, I don't know, for whatever reason. #beekeeping. But yeah,
I'm going to ask you on this. I don't know if you want to. I'm going to let you tell whatever industry secrets that you want here. Okay.
I call it the Stevens method because I'd never read it anywhere, and whenever I articulate it to rock stars like Susan Kobe or Bob Benny, they don't. No, they can't. No compute. I lose.
So walk us through what does that look like for what is your Stevens method?
Okay. Whenever
I know, but I want.
Right. Whenever I figured it out, I would hold, like if you do instrumental insemination, and I learned this from Sue, the ideal time frame to inseminate breeder queens is day 9 or day 10. So basically, I had to get really good at getting old virgins introduced, which is worst case scenario. Anybody will tell you that. And I would work really hard. I would hold them in the nuke so that they would be acquainted with them. I would work really hard. I would stay up late all night Friday collecting semen, which is the crappiest job in the entire world. And then I would put them in there, let them run around so that the sperm migration's better. So I would let them run around in there, and they would murder them. After all that work, they would kill them. And so whenever I was doing a crime scene investigation, this is about 2015 when I figured this out. I learned from her in 2014. What was always in there? Queen cells, emergency queens. Because whenever you'd put a virgin queen or even a cell in there, there's not that full pheromone profile from a mated queen that suppresses their urge to make queen cells. That's the only thing that'll do it, is a mated queen. And so that was really disheartening. But I always learn from the burn, is what I tell James all the time. But I started thinking, well, what if I took those cells out and just held them a little bit longer until they realized they had one option. Do you want this queen that I worked really hard for, or would you choose door B, which is death?
Die. Right. Yeah.
You get one option. Choose wisely. And my take went way up. Well, the reason that is because if a queen lays an egg, I hear some people say, well, I waited 4 days and then I cut the queen cells out. That's not adequate, because if you take her out, it is an egg for 3 days. On day 4, for 24 hours, is the perfect age to raise queens out of. Day 5, not perfect, but they will definitely choose that over death. Day 6, I don't think there's anything they'll really use. Day 7, no way. They know they're hoes. They don't even try. And so I would either put them in there and hold them, like tape or cap over the candy cage. You can put them in there. They'll feed them and take care of them, even though they want to kill them. Wait 7 to 9 days and make sure you remove those cells, and then you can candy release them. And your take went way high. Well, I thought I mechanically outsmarted the bees. And then I realized, no, you're not that smart. What I actually did was mirror nature. So, okay, you have a giant colony that's wanting to swarm. What does the queen do before they take off?
Get skinny.
She gets skinny. She quits laying. So in nature, whenever these virgin queens are emerging, and they'll even hold them in there a lot of times for days, they'll hold them in their cells.
Okay.
Whenever the virgins come out, not always, but a lot of the time, if not the majority of the time, there are no eggs and there is no young larva. There's nothing that they're going to even try to start a queen out of. So the Stevens method of virgin queen introduction, I use it for cells and mated queens too. Mated queens, you don't have to do that really. It's just,
sure.
I just use the method because I have far less of them killed and it just works really well. And so that's the Stevens method. So I made it to where statistically you're going to get more of them mated. And so I feel like I was stubborn enough on pushing virgin queens, and then I started making a name for myself with selecting for VSH and using instrumental insemination. And then going back to what you said earlier about, like, if I have a VSH queen and I graft out of it, especially if it's a breeder, like instrumentally inseminated, where I measured all the labs. Well, every drone that those virgin queens produce should be VSH drones, because, like we talked about, it's not complete. The drones aren't a clone of their mother, but they have the same DNA. It's just recombinated set of DNA. So whenever it doesn't matter if you send them down to your buddy's house that had like 0 UBeeO scores on anything. if those queens open mate down there, all the drones that those queens produce for their entire existence are going to be VSH, if that's what we measured going in. So I think people hadn't thought of that either. So it's kind of like meeting me in the middle. Mated queens aren't profitable. They're a waste of my time. I'm not going to sell them for $30 or $40 or probably not even $50, really.
Yeah, ours are 60. I mean,
Right.
I don't mind saying that.
Yeah. But you're getting into, this is me with a day job. Me without a day job, maybe I'm going to look more at a commercial price and go, okay, well, I'll meet you in the middle somewhere. But with a day job, I'm like, no, I'm just not selling them. I'll sell you a virgin or I'll sell you a queen cell. And then people started doing it. And then some people would keep coming back saying, man, I had a really killer take on that whenever I used your method. And then the business just blew up to where, like I matched my day job salary, and then I knew, like, okay, I'm really getting tired of this job. It's about time to launch. And that's how it was really painful figuring that out. I killed a lot of breeder queens that I worked really hard, but it was such a valuable lesson. I would go back and do it all over again. All the frustration and Derek Clod kicking and stuff
Kicking yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Stuff I may have uttered that was unholy. I would do all of that again because I learned that. And I think that if people who are breeding and selecting like yourself look at that model, it's like we don't think open mated queens are profitable, so meet me in the middle. You take a little risk on mating success. You're getting good tested stock. Like meet me in the middle to where we're both happy. I feel like that's what the industry needs to shift a little bit to allow more people that are really getting after it like yourself, especially if you got a little local co-op going. Who wouldn't want some of that? You know what I mean? And then take that route.
I want to ask you a question on this. So if you don't mind sharing, you and we spoke a couple weeks ago, and it's kind of what prompted this talk with it. I don't know if you mind telling or if you want to edit this out, but what is the best way to ship? I know you've had issues shipping a mated queen, but not issues with virgins. Is that correct?
Well, this is based on a scientific study by Allison McAfee that writes for American Bee Journal. Super smart lady. I did one podcast with her, but she was saying that there's a certain temperature that the bees are exposed to. If they hit that temperature, it starts to kill the sperm in the spermatheca. It doesn't kill the queen. So whenever she shows up, everything looks fine. And some of us have had those queens where you ordered them from somebody and you're like, those jerks, they're drone layers or whatever. And some people may just be jerks that are mailing drone layers. But I think oftentimes that's not the case. They picked you out a queen that was laying good. It looked okay. Everything looked fine. They mail it to you. Those bees are exposed to a temperature that's higher than it should be, and it damages the sperm viability. So she's actually shooting some blanks because of that. Well, with virgins, they haven't mated yet.
No
sperm is not going to be damaged. If it gets a little warm, but it doesn't kill them, doesn't damage them, the sperm's not in there, so the sperm's not damaged. They get to your place, they fly off and mate. Who cares? Everything's fine.
Okay.
So that's where I say virgins are actually superior to ship versus mated queens, and they're for sure better to ship than queen cells because I've worked in transportation, and UPS is a modern miracle that they can get this stuff. Most shipments to their destination by noon the next day. Some of them get lost in Memphis or wherever. So if you ship queen cells, they're cheaper, but if they miss delivery and show up a day late, they're dead. Every single one. They're gone. They're curled up. They're dead. So that's where another thing of meeting in the middle, because I'm a logistics guy. This is what I've done since I got my bachelor's degree, is nothing but logistics and transportation management. So with that being said, I think that virgins are better than anything to ship, whether versus cells or mated queens for the reasons stated.
So let's say I'm going to ship. I mean, just I'm gonna, again, if you don't,
Oh, I
please
don't.
share with me if you don't want to edit it
I don't
out.
yeah.
Let's say I'm shipping 100 virgins out.
Mhm.
Got a box, shake in a ton of nurse bees.
You can.
Um,
I don't
what do
always.
what do I need? What do I need to do?
You can
Walk me through those
either.
steps.
Okay, whenever your virgins are coming out, your cells are emerging. You have to get those into candy cages immediately. So like you need to check them multiple times a day. And usually I'll cheat. Like I'll pop the wax away from the JZBZ and look in there. And like my
Yeah.
kids know how to do this. My kids have opened thousands and thousands of queens, and they don't even think it's cool. Like beekeepers would really think it's awesome, but they're like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Rather game. Anyway, so I look in there, and as soon as they're starting to, their wings are developed, they're starting to wiggle. I'll shake them out of that cell. I make sure they have all their wings, all their legs. They look normal. They're large. If they're undersized, sometimes you'll get one and like it's one or two of its front legs are curled up. Sometimes the wings got banged, or sometimes they're undersized. I mean, I've seen everything from.
You call those
I
immediately.
call them. That's another thing with virgins is queen cells. You'll get a textbook frame of queen cells that look like the kind you put on Facebook to let people know you figured something out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you open
Guilty.
exactly, I've done the same thing. You open all those up. Occasionally, you'll hit a batch that you'll have some that are dead in it. And if you candle it, everything looks okay because it made it to the
Yeah.
stage. It's dead.
Mm-hmm.
You're wasting a nuke. So with a
Okay.
virgin, I'm going through there and culling all that. You're only getting the best of the best. That's another advantage to virgins. But put them in candy cages immediately. I mean, they immediately they'll die within hours if you don't.
Have you seen the Easy Bee cage
Yeah, yep. Dan sent me some of those, and that's
and
the option.
thoughts?
The thing is transferring them to a shipping. You have to move them again. That's my only complaint with those. Like they go from the cell directly into a JZBZ shipping cage. And so they go into
Okay.
candy cages. Within 24 to 48 hours, I add attendants inside the cage, which totally sucks. Most people aren't going to want to do that. They've never grabbed thousands and thousands of bees with their fingers like I have. But like
Yeah.
I'm like a jujitsu guy now, those bees do not get away. But
And
you have
you don't care if it's a forager or a nurse at that point for a attendant?
well, okay. Here's another trade secret. Most people, if they go to collect attendants, what do they say to grab? Most people,
I would
nurse
think nurses.
nurse
Yeah.
bees. If you get a fuzzy nurse bee that just came out of its cell, those things are nutritionally deficit. It hasn't
Okay.
eaten since before it pupated, so they're like starving basically. They're young, they're
Okay.
not going to attack a queen, but they're starving. Look on those brood frames where there's open brood, and you'll see worker bees with badonkadonks, like these huge booties.
Okay.
Those are the ones you want. And the reason why is because they're gorging themselves to feed brood. So
Okay.
that's a trade secret. You're welcome, people.
Hey, me and you, thank you. So like that's what I mean that's that. Remember I told you that I'm looking for that one little tip. That's it. There you go.
The whole thing was worth it just for that.
Yeah.
But you can
Yeah.
basically go in any queen right colony and grab those fatties off of those frames, and they're not going to attack the queen. And they're loaded, and they can feed her. So those are the ones I'm catching. And the reason I do that, it's easier to just shake bees on top of shipper bars if those queens are in there. But I feel like they're better cared for inside there. And I have a lot of clubs, like Sustainable Beekeepers Guild of Michigan. They'll order bulk and then they'll divvy them up. Well, imagine trying to divvy them up and you got bees flying everywhere, wherever you're at. It's just way nicer to be able to
So you're not shaking in bees into the box in addition to you're just letting the attendants 4 or 5 attendants.
Yeah, I usually add 6 because sometimes if I'm adding them on Saturday evening, you've got Sunday. They don't go out till Monday. Sometimes Tuesday. Occasionally, you'll have a 1 or 2 die in there, and like I go through them to make for certain the queen is okay. And if it's just a worker that's died, I'll pick it out with a pair of tweezers. Just you don't want dead bees accumulating in
Sure.
there. It doesn't
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
And so like I'll pick a couple out. If you put 6 in there, if 2 die, you got 4. She's going to be perfectly fine. And then I ship next day air only. I don't play games. If you want cheaper shipping, maybe Ashby will do it. I,
No,
I
all that work to get to that point, we want it there.
Right. Well, the thing is
Okay.
I guarantee live delivery, and I tried cheaper options, and I eat too much. I'm not interested in that. I want you to get live bees because some people they're like proactive instead of holding that queen in the nuke for 7 or 8 days and cutting all the cells and then uncapping the candy. They'll make
Yeah.
the nukes up 7 days in advance from Tuesday, cut the cells, and as soon as those queens show up, they go in. So they're not held.
Perfect.
Yeah, unless they show up dead, and then they have to wait a week. Exactly. So like,
Okay.
don't mess around. I only ship next day air. If they show up dead, I'll pay for next day air. I'll pay for your new queens. Like that's just the way I roll. They're not cheap. I don't sell cheap queens. Not interested in that. I want to make money, and I want you to have something that I would want in my colonies. So
That's been my biggest thing. There is you'll get this, and some people don't get this, but for me, it's Ashby Farms. For you, it's Stevens BeeCo.
yep.
When your name's on it, it's not such and such bee company. Like you said, when my name's on it, it's something I would be proud to have that queen, and I
Yep.
want you to feel the same way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And stuff happens in beekeeping, and how I deal with it also has my name on it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If you just
Yep.
stick it to you and just
Yep.
write it off or blow it off, and I don't address it, I don't do new ones. If something happens, UPS dropped the ball or lost them or whatever, then that also is on me. So I think you have to expect that that's going to happen. It still sucks when it happens.
It's beekeeping. Nothing goes perfect.
Exactly. But you got to have that in your price too. Know that something's gonna go wrong, and in order to make it right, you got to have that in your price to where you're not just as soon as you lose a shipment, you're just going backwards, where it's not even worth doing anymore. You've got to think about that sustainably, and if you're not making a profit, it's not sustainable. I don't think.
A good friend of mine is David Bailey. He runs Bailey Bee Supply out of Hillsboro, North Carolina. And when I first met David, one of the first things I ever heard him say, he said, "If I wanted to go broke, I'd sit at home on the couch." Yep. And here I am.
Well, you probably did something earlier.
But I always quote David and say, "If I want to go broke, I am in business. I'm not looking to be a billionaire, but I am looking to bring something to the table that I would like to put my name on."
Yep.
For time, all of time, and I would like to help. I've always served others. That's.
And keep doing that for 10 or 20 years. I don't want to just go off like a bottle rocket and then decide it's not worth it and quit. Which happens. I'm not faulting anyone for realizing that. I felt like if I just followed what everybody else did and sold queens for what everybody else did and did whatever everybody else did, I wouldn't quit my day job. I don't think I would be able to.
You're not distinguished at that point. You're just one of the. It's the equivalent of a purebred versus a puppy mill.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Somebody that's putting the work in, and exactly.
Well, think about the hours and even for you, the years that have gone into developing a bee that you're proud of. That is, even still, Randy Oliver said it best. He's been working at this for 30 years.
Yeah,
30 plus years. His sons are now taking over, and he won't even claim he's got a VSHB, even though a third of his 1,000 colonies don't show any mites.
Right.
I would call that a VSH, but he won't.
Which is
Excuse me.
which is accurate. Like I agree. If I was in Randy's shoes, I would do the exact same thing. But Randy's also selecting off alcohol washes, and I don't think alcohol washes is a predictor of VSH. But alcohol washes are designed as an IPM metric to determine if you're above threshold and you need to treat. And I've seen too many late season Harbo assays that would have at least 5 non-reproductive mites in a 100 sample. That's 5 in 100. How many is in an alcohol wash? 300.
You're looking for under, yeah.
So that would be a 15 wash.
15 might count.
Randy threw that sucker out in the grass. If he would have done an SMR test on it or VSH Harbo assay, 100% VSH. He just called it. So, and I've seen stuff.
All that work.
Threw it out, but it's just because it's not that Randy isn't way smarter than me. Obviously, he is. But it's just that I don't think he has entertained that or has used that as a metric. I think it's a more accurate predictor of actual mite resistance. I think UBeeO falls into that category. And John Harbo will say the same thing. Frank Arinkovich, that I just spoke with recently at the USDA Bee Lab, would say the exact same thing. And is the Harbo assay foolproof? And no, it's a simplified assay to help you quantify suppressed mite reproduction. Can you fool it? Yes. If you just hit it with amitraz, you're going to get false positives. That's why I like your idea where you said earlier, UBeeO test in the springtime, Harbo test later. Because if you've cleaned up those mites, you can get false positives. There's bees that are not measurably mite resistant that will have a very low mite load, even sometimes mid-season. It's just like, I guess they're not robbing. I think you're selecting for something other than mite resistance. Bees that don't rob or something. Somehow they're not bringing them home as much, but they're not really resistant. Once they get them, they don't know what to do with them.
Yes.
The alcohol washes all over the place as far as, and I don't think it's a good predictor of mite resistance. And
I've got I was reading a thread earlier on Facebook, and there's a lady, she said, long and short, I tend to be kind of a conspiracy theorist kind of guy. Okay. Like, hey, by the way, do you have any new conspiracy theories? All my old ones came true.
Exactly. That's been the case lately.
Okay. So, this lady is wearing a tinfoil hat.
Yeah.
And it scares me the way she is talking about mites. She is the mite bomb that I fear.
Yeah.
Doesn't believe mite bombs exist. I'm like, oh man, the data shows otherwise.
Yeah, where did they come from? Obviously, other beehives, because Varroa are blind. I don't even know how they exist. But
so it's like, okay, with that, mite, like people ask me, what about mite wash? I'm like, I've never done a mite wash. Not Cory. We're going. I have 4 years of beekeeping. I am no expert longevity wise, but we have 500 colonies. Yeah. We started with 40. I overwintered 2. We bought 50 packages. We immediately had 7 abscond, so we started with 45. And we grew. I understood what was supposed to happen, and I just was a sponge. Okay, and I now have the hours in the field to say I'm a commercial beekeeper, but I don't have the year.
Sure. Yep.
But I look at this and this lady scares me with, well, how else did they get a mite bomb? I can't verify because I don't do a mite wash. I don't think it's worth my time. Yeah. A mite wash is for someone who doesn't really care about genetics so much, but just wants to know that, it's time to treat.
Yep.
Throw a chemical at them.
Yep.
It's really good for the hobbyist beekeeper. It's even decent for commercial beekeepers. But if you're getting into what we're doing, might washes are out the window.
Well,
Harbo assay, you have to do the work.
totally. But imagine doing an alcohol wash on 500 colonies. You wouldn't get anything else done. You know what I mean?
Now,
like, it is so
have you heard? Randy Oliver has one of those shaker trays in the lab.
Randy's a freak of nature.
And he has a crew of 5, and they're all run. He's like, yeah, we can do we can average a colony a minute. He said, I've done the labor math. It's $1.50 a colony in labor to do a mite wash. So we do them once a month, and I'm like, well then, you sir have perfected that, because
right,
Ashby and Cory, we don't do mite washes at all, nor do we have the time. We're just trying to keep the wheels from coming off,
and we don't have people working for us. Like, if on a good day I have Jamie, Jade, and Camden, and they're usually not real happy about being out there. So a little different scenario. But yeah, I mean, alcohol wash is great for quantifying a mite load. Like, that's what it's designed for. Like, I went to school to be an entomologist. Thanks Nestle, they paid for a lot of it. But that's the one thing they drill in your head is IPM, 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 which makes sense. Like, if we're opening that door, IPM is basically just saying, do you need to treat? I have no idea. With bees, probably so. But
and for at home, if you don't know, IPM is integrated pest management.
Correct.
It's a plan to watch, identify, and treat if necessary.
Correct. Yeah, you're quantifying the need to treat and looking at economic and damage thresholds. Like, is it worth it to go ahead and knock these down? If it hits that, yes, then economically it's worth the time and the cost of the treatment to knock them down. But yeah, that's where I was saying it's good for that, but I don't think that it's I think that's why Randy hasn't had the total success, the total world domination that his personality likes. Same here. I want to slay at whatever I'm doing, and it's not from lack of trying, and it's not from lack of intelligence, because Randy's a brilliant guy. I think that the reason he hasn't had the results he wants is because of the metric he's using personally.
Randy, probably right around the time I got into bees, I listened to Randy. He said, you can be a biologist at home. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to be a biologist. And now, like, I'm neck deep in biology.
Yeah.
Telling people at the club, I'm not doing the nationals. I hope one day people would like to listen to me in mass, but right now I'm just doing the club level. And I tell people, you can be a biologist. This is not hard to do. Randy told me 4 years ago. Now look where I'm at. Yeah. And they're all like, yeah, I'm not going to be a biologist. It's not that daunting. It's really not.
But that's the thing too, is like, not everybody wants to do that. But if you have cooperatives that are actually selecting, have breeders that are actually selecting, you meet them in the middle to where it's profitable for both of you. You don't have to be a biologist. Just be a beekeeper that doesn't buy trash queens. And then a lot of your problems go away on their own.
It's amazing. Right.
Exactly.
All right, so I just popped in my head. Phil, there's a question that Phil wants me to ask, and just bear with me, okay? So, longevity in queens.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to Michael Palmer. Well, back up a second. I was part of a talk back in the spring with I don't know if you know, over in England is Sebastian Malinowski.
Yeah, contacted me a while back.
So he reached out and said, "Hey, will you do a bee talk?" I said, "Sure." And then there was Mike Berry from Louisiana, and Bob Walker, Walker's Bee Ranch in Columbia, South Carolina. And Sebastian says, "Hey, we have a guest speaker tonight," and on pops Michael Palmer, and I'm like, fanboy,
Yeah, exactly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, we were supposed to do like an hour, and turned into like that 2.5 hour call. That's awesome. And I felt like I asked good questions, and Michael gave me great responses. And to sum up part of that talk was, he told me, he keeps meticulous records. I mean, you and I would fawn over the data.
Pretty
So he
cool.
has this colony. He requeens it in 2002. He requeens it in 2009. 7 years later, he requeens it again in 2015. 6 years later, he's big on well-bred queens have enough sperm to last.
Yep.
And in identifying VSH as a trait early on with what you and I are doing, as long as that queen continues to make it through the winter and then continue to lay a good brood pattern, nobody in beekeeping tests for longevity because of a lack of record keeping.
Yep.
Well, I mean that's a big driver, but also there's the claim that young virgin queens have vigor. Well,
New queens. Yeah.
like for us this year, we've got this drone flooded area. I want my queens to be bred with at least 30 drones minimum. So I mean, we're gonna have. And my goal is 200. I don't know if the landowners will let me keep that many. I may have to pick up some more in our area, but I'd like to have 200 colonies so that it's just drone flooded with our choice genetics. Um, what's your thoughts on selecting our breeder queens based on longevity?
I think it's
Like we,
I think it's a really good idea, and there's probably who would think there's probably things that we're not even aware of that you're actually selecting for them, and it could be a form of disease resistance. It could be that they just have I don't know if it's just an urge to have more multiple mating, so they've got the diversity, they've got the sperm content to go the distance. But my model, I love old queens, so I actually got a lot of them murdered this year because I saved them. Whenever I said I was moving the old queens out before they would swarm, if they started getting a little swarmy, I would move them out and use that as a cell builder. And I lost the records because I moved them. Well, a lot of those were 3-year-old queens, but I put them in a little bitty nucleus and I didn't move them out of the yard. Sometimes I can get away with it, but we had so much robbing because it was a
and they
crap.
got beat up.
Oh, they got annihilated. So I lost some killer old queens. But
Oh,
talking about a cooperative model, well, I've I'm already doing this, but I'm going to expand it substantially. But basically, what I do is I started it a couple years ago. There's two main guys that are doing it with me now. One runs about 1,000 colonies, and he's run my breeders for the past 3-4 years, something like that. So he sends me back whenever they're splitting. They want young queens. They're pitching these old girls out in the grass. Well, that's breeding gold because I know
yeah.
it came from my breeder. It's been to California. It comes back, and like you were saying, coming out of winter, they're ready to tear it up. These are big, big productive colonies. Those are going to make the most honey. You don't have to have a metric on that. Those are the ones that are going to produce. So he mails me back the old girls that are F1s. I put them in nukes, and then I'll Harbo or UBeeO test them after they've been in the nukes long enough, and then repeat, repeat, repeat. And another one of my buddies is doing the same thing. They run about 3,000 colonies out of Cape Girardeau, and they're doing the same thing. I've added a couple more people, and whenever I'm doing it full time, I'm going to go even larger. The point of me saying that is all I'm selecting for are older queens, and also that they're a year old whenever they get sent to me. We're just getting started because they're going to have to
Right.
7 weeks before I test them, and then if it remains that way, I'm going to have them next year. I'm going to have them the year after that until they start to fizzle, or I kill them on accident. You know what I
And
mean?
tell viewers at home. I know this answer, but tell viewers at home, why do we wait 7 weeks?
Wait
Somebody
7 weeks because, like, if you go to a colony and you put a queen in it and you test it right away, you're testing the behavior of the workers that are not that queen's daughters. It was who you threw out in the grass or moved somewhere. You're testing that queen that you smashed. Basically,
Yep.
you want to wait 7 weeks so it's all her daughters because it's a genetic behavioral response, and you want that to be her daughter, so you can measure their response and know she carries that trait as in the queen. So then you graft out of those that are high scoring. I'm glad you pointed that out. There's a
Yeah. So what my upcoming, how your plans are always changing. The November 1st plan is not going to be enacted quite right in that. But my goal next, so early on, I shattered my left elbow in 2020 in about 6 pieces and had a complete left arm rebuild. And then I thought, I could really get into beekeeping.
Yeah.
Nothing heavy there.
Right.
This is how stupid I was. I don't want to. So I immediately built about 350 nuke boxes. I planned on just nuke beekeeping.
Yep.
And then the arm healed. Everything's fine now. I got into 10 frame stuff. I wax did everything out of rough cut 1-inch pine. My equipment is heavy. I mean, it's everybody who comes around says, "Man, your boxes are heavy," but it doesn't go anywhere. I don't have to have straps. They're migratory covers, so they glue them down. I mean, everything's glued. So my goal next year is to go into winter with about 600 nukes.
Awesome.
All F1s from our tested breeders.
Yep.
And this Ian Stepler does a form of this, which is, he runs about 1,200 colonies. He has a battery bank of 300 nukes.
Yep.
Well, I thought, why wouldn't I just go in? I've got all this equipment. Why not keep a battery of nukes? We have really fair winters. Probably better weather than you. Excuse me. And go into winter with 600 nukes. Watch how they perform in the spring, just based on numbers.
Yep.
We got them through winter. Who comes out swinging? We can then early on they've got their pheromones established. We can run a UBeeO test on them in March. Yep. And then there's our breeder queens to sell. Yep. I would imagine just by numbers, if you're, I'm gonna go say we probably ran 7 out of 23 tested, so we had 30% of our, but that's a small sample size. So I'm not gonna sit here and say a third of our outfit is, I can just say a third of our test. But my goal is, if we had a third of 600 come anywhere close as what would then be granddaughters of my own stock and would be daughters of the co-op stock. Mm-hmm. That's a great sample size, 600 nukes to sit back and watch.
Totally.
That really gives you a large volume to. I would like to get in 5 years where if it doesn't have a UBeeO score of at least 90, it's out.
Yep.
If it doesn't have a perfect Harbo score, it's out.
Yep.
In a dream world, we would say that again.
You're going to see a major difference in your if you're having that good a survival with a current test, your survival is going to be even higher because you're not going to have as much. You're still going to have mine, but you're not going to have the viral issues. You're not going to have any brood disease issues. I say any. Occasionally something will pop up, but it could be toxicity. I'm in a high ag spray area, so they all get something, and I thought maybe it was something else, but they've just been burning all the fields down with stuff too, so it's hard to tell. Anyway, I was starting to wrap.
And then sorry, I had a space on a question for you.
Winter in a large volume of nukes, which I like that. My favorite's a 5/5. Those winter better than double 10 frames. I think it's just because they're condensed into the stores, and they move up, and I have migratory lids on those too. And if I get a warm day, I can stick a syrup bottle on them. They're getting pretty thin later, and it just seems like those things winter like crazy. But you better do something with them in the springtime. You better move them to 10 frames or split them 9 ways from Sunday, or they're going to be hanging in the trees for sure.
Yeah. Man, I'm just trying to. back to the with the longevity thing. So, what would be for you a criteria? Let's say you're on. You mentioned having a bunch of third year queen stock. Now, obviously, due to record keeping, you've lost those particular queens.
Not
What
all,
would have to
but a lot. I did lose several of them.
what would have to occur? What would you be looking for that would say she's out of the program? What would be your key indicator
I mean,
after 3 years?
if they start shooting blanks, or the colony size just gets down to where she's just not able to sustain it anymore. You
Yeah.
know, I had a 3-year-old artificially inseminated breeder I pinched this spring because she started
Okay.
shooting blanks.
Okay.
3 years, made it through winter, and then she gave up the ghost.
Ran out. Yeah, ran out.
Yeah, and that was artificially inseminated. She got 10 microliters. Like how much of it migrated, I have no idea. But I mean, if I get 2 full seasons out of a breeder queen, I'm happy with it. And a lot of them perform just like an open mated queen. Like a lot of them were packed double deeps with 3 honey supers on it last year. Whenever we actually had honey, they should function as normal.
I don't know. I remembered what my other question was. Did you see a recent video with Bob Benny talking about EFB and AFB, the spread?
Started it and I squirreled on something else and I didn't get to finish it.
Would you, being that those are bacterial brood issue, obviously, like I've heard you say in past videos that when we start introducing this is talking about your stock here. You basically said you bring in virgins. Let's say a random person's at home. They buy your virgins. They bring them in. Within a year or two, we notice the drones in the air are increasing and making better stock in their area, and then that leads to less chalk brood and other brood
absolutely. Yeah, you'll never
issues.
Yep.
How obviously Bob makes a great point that the commercial breeders still stand by throw terramycin or the other 2 antibiotics at them. We're making a and let's take EFB. EFB is growing resistant to antibiotics, traditional antibiotics. How would a VSH trait, would they be more resistant to those sort of brood diseases?
Oh yeah, totally. So the only thing is though, is like, and I haven't seen it in years, which of course my VSH scores are going up and my UBeeO scores will do the same, which they were exceptionally high. But one thing I was just thinking of whenever you're saying that is like if you see EFB, a lot of times the larvae will look thick, like they're off colored or they'll be a little melty or something.
A little melty, a little gray.
Yep, exactly. Okay. But a lot of the hygienic function, I was just thinking of this. I guess they'll throw larvae out too because I don't see it. But usually they don't throw them out. Like whenever they're detecting mites or detecting UBeeO, it's purple-eyed or right before the purple-eyed stage of pupa. But that's how they keep viral levels low. Like I haven't seen one cell of chalk brood in a decade, but I've been using VSH queens. As soon as I started using them, I've never seen a cell of it again. And I haven't treated in at least 12 years or so with antibiotics, fumagil, any type of miticide, including organic acids. And I tell people
not even alfalfa.
No, I don't use it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. You should, but the reason why I didn't is because I was so obsessive over selecting for host resistance. I wanted to see what they were able to do without me helping them out, which isn't something most people should do. And a lot of people that
you're gonna take a beating if you do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing: is a lot of people they want the moral superiority of being treatment free, but they're not selecting for anything, and they can be. Here's the way I look at it: are you fixing more problems than you're creating? If you're actually breeding, then yeah, there's a good chance if you're pretty good at what you're doing, you could be fixing more problems than you're creating. The people that just take their hands off, they're well meaning. They want to be like, okay, nature will sort it out. But oftentimes they're not they're not as good at beekeepers as the commercial people that they throw rocks at, but they have this arrogance about them of that they're not treating, but oftentimes they're creating more problems than they're fixing. And so that makes me unpopular with them. So be it. I mean, I
My
feel like
grandma would say they mean well, bless their hearts.
exactly. Yeah, and some
Yeah,
of them are
I
the
mean,
best people in the world, and I'm not saying that to burst their bubble, but things are complex, you know. And like, but if you look at the USDA Bee Lab, I thought I was just being too hard nosed and a little bit crazy whenever I was doing that, because a lot of people, I felt like they're like, dang, he's doing some things that we're not able to do, but I don't trust him because he's not treating his bees. That's like, you know what I mean? He should probably be burned at the
right.
stake. That's probably what they were thinking.
And then turn around 12 years later, you
Yeah,
got, you know.
honest. And I also like, if you talk to the guys at the USDA Bee Lab, their colonies, because they're trying to measure host resistance. So once I figured that out years ago, I'm like, okay, I'm not completely crazy. But that's my take on that. And I did an interview with Fred Dunn, and I saw somebody was really not happy about me not promoting treatment-free beekeeping. And like,
Yeah.
I take back 0 words that I said, and I meant what I said.
Oh man.
I'm unapologetic about that. You need to have an informed decision of what you're doing. And I'm not saying you should treat, I'm not saying you shouldn't treat. You need to weigh the options, and you need to make a decision that's good and good for your community too. But
So I'll tell you what we did this year. I did Apivar strips the last 2 years. And then we saw a 15%. We saw a 12% loss the first winter, 15% loss the second winter, and I realized that genetics needs to be my focus, because when you crunch the numbers at a scale, like we're going into winter with about 500 colonies right now, we're in real money now, and these problems, these are no longer $1,000 problems; they're $10,000 problems.
exactly. Yep. And look at the national average for loss, 40 something percent. Most of these
Yeah.
guys know how to manage bees, and they're losing a fair amount.
Yeah.
So you're taking a risk whenever you do that. And you know, I know you like taking a risk here and there too. I
But
obviously taken a risk, but it was a calculated risk. That's what we're into.
yeah,
But
yeah.
at the same time, genetics is the only sustainable long term solution. There are no.
But, so we did Apagard, which is thymol, and I'd heard, it's not like I had the experience, right? My bees took a beating. I mean, like we lost 10% of our colonies in August. Um, the bees, some came back swinging. 40% of my hives did not come back swinging.
Oh man!
It took a probiotic, a bunch of thin syrup. I can't do a pollen patty because of our small hive beetle problem at that time of year. We just took a beating. I don't
Do you think
I don't have any other.
Do you think that
Well,
it was just crap, or
thymol was tough. It was in the mid 90s. I'm doing a 30-gram dose a week apart, 7 to 10 days apart.
that's pretty effective though? Did you say you used Apivar?
No, Apagard thymol.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. See, I was thinking Apivar. Sorry, I misunderstood you, because I know that with some local beekeepers here that they were pretty clever. This was a year or 2 years ago. They did washes to kind of see approximately where they're at, and then they used the approved Amatraz based one, and then they checked it again, and it
Didn't work.
cut the yeah. But that's not thymol. I've heard, like, I think thymol is one of the steady eddies from what I've heard.
I'm giving a talk tomorrow night, and it's like, all right, what's our choice? You can't use Formic Pro in August because it's too hot. Oxalic acid takes too many rounds. It's not effective until winter. Thymol and Amatraz are our two options. Amatraz is, I based on some papers I've read, I would speculate Amitraz is going to lose its efficacy definitely within 10 and probably within 5. And that's the old standby.
I would agree. Yeah, that's been a really good one. I
So
don't know.
thymol is your only answer, and I took a beating that you can see on my. I mean, I wince at telling you what a beating we took.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that again. So I would rather do uh, better genetics, oxalic acid in the winter. I don't want to do a complete live and let die, but
Yeah.
we got to figure something out.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about UBeeO too. Now you had it right whenever you said earlier, test UBeeO early, do Harbo later, so that you build up a little bit of a mite load before you Harbo test. That way you're cutting back on false positives. With UBeeO, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't affect it. So I think
Yep.
that's one advantage that UBeeO has over a Harbo assay is that mite loads are completely irrelevant. You're not banking on it.
I would like you to tell me your thoughts on this. People ask, I've been asked, what's my thoughts on freeze brewed assay in selecting for VSH? And my answer every time is a freeze brewed assay will test for how hygienic your bees are, but not in relation to Varroa one bit.
Yep, agreed. It's all over the place. And now I say that this is just from scientific data. I haven't personally, so I could be off base here, but from my understanding, freeze killed brood may or may not select for VSH. So like basically it doesn't. If you like VSH bees are predominantly hygienic, so it's better than just covering your eyes and hoping for the best, but it's not the best predictor. It's just like alcohol washes are not a predictor of VSH. I don't feel like now VSH bees overall will have lower mite loads, but it's not a dead-on predictor. But I think that's where UBeeO and Kara and Phoebe opened a door that that I think they're going to keep developing things, but I think they came from an angle that nobody had even thought of yet that is going to yield things that we haven't even believed. And I think UBeeO is going to be a total game changer, but not just getting people to select for it and having actual resistance, but what we learned from it and what people, it's going to change their thoughts on testing. And there's going to be some cool stuff come from it.
I suspect we're gonna, by using UBeeO as a spring selector, we're gonna have some unintended consequences.
Always.
But also we're gonna have. Marla Spivak has talked many times about identifying SMR as far as like the actual genes. It's not just hey, it's this one.
It's multiple genes.
It's like 30 different ones, and they can't pinpoint what combination creates a really hygienic bee. I suspect UBeeO is going to lead us to some unintended good consequences that we see. We selected for VSH a hygienic behavior specific to Varroa and stress brood, but some additional outcomes were significantly less viral loads, significantly less.
That's
you might even say nosema.
Yeah.
Phil and I have talked about the selection with UBeeO lead to less swarming.
Yeah.
Because swarming is a trait. Mm-hmm. What's the only way to select for swarming right now? You graft off the ones that don't swarm.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, what if you're doing your test on the bees that didn't swarm, and then it's like a 2-for-1.
Interesting. I never even thought about that. That's
We can't pinpoint what genes do swarm and don't swarm. But if we treat, like for me, we're going to treat all of our colonies the same. We're going to take the same splits out of them, and inadvertently some swarm and some don't. So it's a selection process. All right. Well, we're not going to test the new queens. We're going to test the ones that didn't swarm. Over time, we're going to, like you said, we're going to narrow that scope. I wonder if over time we're going to breed a less swarmy be as an is a good consequence
Yeah.
of using UBeeO selection.
Yeah, that's a definite possibility. And some people are like, oh well, if everybody does it, they're already trying to think of problems it's going to create. I'm like, look, what percentage of our industry is selecting for a host resistance? Almost no one. So who cares?
Almost
Everybody starts
less than
doing
1%. Yeah,
exactly. Like if
right.
the majority of people, there's always going to be people that rebel or don't want to do it or don't like it for some reason, which is okay, you know. But I think if most people adopt that or are starting to look for UBeeO selected queens, it's going to change the industry because instead of accepting just run of the mill zero resistant queens, you know, we're asking about it. It's more of a buzzword. And if I heard one commercial guy say, I could care less about VSH or hygiene or any of that, but if people want those queens, then I care. So, you know,
Right.
people are
Yeah.
starting to ask for it, and those bigger producers start using it or looking for it and fan for it a little bit, then everybody wins because all those queens that come out, you know, like people talk trash about package bees and stuff. Well, a lot of it's because the queens are just subpar. If you had a package with a bomb new VSH queen in there that's gonna slay,
That wasn't laying 2 weeks, was laying 3 weeks.
right? Exactly.
Or realistically, like I try and do 24 days. If we can have, I tell people I won't sell you in less than 21 days.
Yep.
I would prefer 24 days.
Yep.
If you're buying a mated queen, yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And I hope you charge for that to where it's profitable because
yeah,
you know, that's the only thing. And whenever I learned that, I think it was like my third or fourth year of beekeeping, I learned how to raise queens, and I bought Tom Glenn VSH breeders and went off the deep end. And so Grant Gillard had me speak at the state meeting, like, you know, this kid that is raising a bunch of queens, and
yeah.
Well, how much do you sell those things for? You know. And David Burns was behind me. I was like, oh, I get $30 a piece. He's like, too cheap. You know, subtly and not so subtly letting me
right.
charge more for it, which made me laugh.
Right.
But yeah,
give them away. Give them away.
But it was a good caution. Make sure you're making something off of it, and you have to weigh, you know, what that is and where you're happy with. And everybody's going to look at it differently. You know, it's not a one size fits all for sure. But I think our conversation was pretty productive. We're getting close to 2 hours.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. I really do. I feel like it's been just me shooting you questions, so thanks for.
That's perfect. I think so. Like, if it's just me, you know, like if I give a presentation somewhere, I live for the Q&A because, like, you know, I feel like I'm droning on sometimes. Sometimes I'm on fire and it's funny and people are, but some stuff it's technical. I can't wait for the Q&A because then people wake up and start asking questions and it's more dynamic. And so, yeah, I'm glad you did that. It opened up some good conversation.